You have exactly 3 seconds to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll appear in your dreams tonight. To ask for a donation for that cup of coffee, link below.
On New Year's Eve, while millions of Asian families gathered around the traditional New Year's feast to prepare for the moment of renewal and transformation, technological earthquake struck China. On the Spring Festival Gala stage, this is the kind of entertainment that CCTV provides to the public every year, and the spotlight is no longer on music, traditional performances. Under the bright lights, the central position was dominated by an army of humanoid robots. The incredibly smooth and precise movements of these mechanical entities have caused a global sensation. It also led many to question how Beijing could possibly dominate this cutting-edge industry. To begin, let's rewind time to that very spring night in 2025. A moment that perhaps Wang Xingxing, the young founder of Unit Robotics, would never have decided upon. That night, the company of the businessman born in 1990 presented a truly disheartening performance at the music festival. The group of humanoid robots danced to the traditional Niang dance. However, instead of a breakthrough, what the audience saw was a series of awkwardly moving machines. Along with that came stiff, rigid sewing movements following a pre-programmed formation. Instead of expressions of admiration, public opinion was instead filled with mockery. They even compared the unit robot team to something else, like toddlers learning to walk. For a perfectionist and world-changing individual like Wang Xingxing, those harsh criticisms became a deep-seated blow to his professional pride. But amidst the mocking smile, instead of arguing, he chose to remain silent and throw himself into his work. After enduring 12 months of hardship and perseverance, he and his team embarked on a fierce race against time. And then, exactly 1 year later, on the same stage on New Year's Eve, 2026, the army of humanoid robots returned. But this time their limping gait had completely disappeared. They appear with sophisticated combinations of moves, impeccable balance, and movements so smooth that the audience is left in awe. That performance was not only a statement from Unichi but also a symbol of Beijing's powerful rise in the 5 trillion robotics market. The founder of Unichi will represent the country of over a billion people and send a clear message. China may have started later, but they are now on par with the front-runners. That's right. For decades, the humanoid robot temple was the exclusive domain of the two gods. Japan, represented by the legendary Ashimo, is an icon, has become ingrained in the memories of generations. Next up is the US with its acrobatic monsters that look like they stepped right out of a science fiction movie. Produced Boston Dynamics. But that order is being overturned at a dizzying pace, and the gates of the legendary temple are now forced to open wide to receive the new name, China. But Beijing isn't just strolling in, it's launching a full-scale early takeover of the market. According to a report from a geospatial analytics company, China will account for 90% of the approximately 13,000 humanoid robots that will be shipped worldwide. Beijing has created a huge gap between itself and forcing giants in the US and Japan to bow in admiration to the rapid expansion of Chinese domestic products. And according to forecasts from Morgan Stanley, this trend shows no sign of stopping, as the number of robots entering the market of over 1 billion people could reach 28,000 by 26. So what has caused this unprecedented leap forward? The spectacular turnaround of China's humanoid robot manufacturing industry is not just the result of individual effort, but a comprehensive national plan. In 2023, while the whole world was still preoccupied with the semiconductor craze, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology and 16 other government agencies quietly signed a groundbreaking agreement, action plan, deploying the community robot application. This is not just a typical encouraging document, but a milestone marking Beijing's official elevation of robotics to the same level as semiconductors and high intelligence. That is the strategic layer for redefining the position of the world's most populous nation in the new era. This particular preference stems from the view of the Zhongnan high leadership that if someone possesses a brilliant mind, then a humanoid robot is the body that allows that intelligence to flourish. Against the backdrop of declining birth rates, it is also a crucial solution for Beijing to maintain and expand its global dominance. 10 key application areas for robots have been identified, ranging from mass-market applications like industrial manufacturing to more demanding fields such as medical surgery, rescue operation, and elderly care. Immediately, the political decision was transformed. The government has consistently injected massive amounts of capital to subsidize and invest in research centers in Shanghai, Beijing, and Hangzhou. The objective is very clear. China must master core components and begin mass production. 2 years later, Ho had to possess a complete ecosystem and lead the global supply chain. It is thanks to these incentives that businesses have sprung up like mushroom, with promising names such as Unichi, aka Magic, Boz, and Note. These companies also have a very unique approach using real-world experience to nurture technology, looking at how American and Japanese medical professionals are developing robots. We can see a very clear philosophy with perfectionism and a focus on technical excellence. They typically concentrate on extremely meticulous research, perfecting even the smallest details in the laboratory before releasing their findings to the public. This approach allowed them to create the most technically advanced machines, but the rate of commercialization was the Chinese chose a different approach. They launched the product first and then fixed the bugs during operation. The government played a pioneering role in this strategy when requiring large businesses to reopen into practical operation to test them in the face of adversity. The practical experience gained from factories in Shenzhen and Hangzhou became the fuel for the improvement process. Thanks to this, startups like Unity can detect, optimize algorithm, and hardware at a speed that many Western competitors struggle to match. Unity's clumsy performance in 2025 is a prime example of this strategy. The Chinese didn't wait until the robot was perfect to bring the Lion Chun dance to the festival. Instead, they brought it onto the stage to gauge public reaction, gather, and solidify brand presence. Then, returned to the engineering room and made improvements at a breakneck pace, while competitors are still meticulously refining their software in tightly controlled environments. Dozens of Chinese companies have already deployed thousands of prototypes in real-world environments. And that's also why humanoid robots made in China have made such great strides in such a short time. Besides trial and error approach, Beijing possesses another secret weapon: the willingness to accept losses in order to capture the market. Chinese companies are willing to sacrifice initial profits to keep production costs very low. Their goals are very pragmatic: seize market share and set technical standards before competitors can react. Imagine if each humanoid robot in the US or Japan could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Chinese manufacturers are aiming to bring prices down to below 30,000, the equivalent of a mid. This figure means that equipping businesses with humanoid robots is no longer just a dream for billionaires, but a viable investment for small-scale manufacturers. And as the scale of deployment expands, the cost advantage continues to solidify. That's also the familiar formula for dominating the market, used by mainland goods. And it doesn't stop at sales policies and tactics. Beijing's success in the production of humanoid robots is also a sweet fruit of the industrial ecosystem that P has built up over China. Possesses almost comprehensive component manufacturing capabilities, from high-power single-sheet sensor processing chips to precision motion components, most of which can be supplied domestically. Not being dependent on foreign countries brings many tangible benefits, from extremely low costs and extremely fast shipping to having anything repaired immediately. That's not even considering the synergistic effect when Chinese robotics companies don't operate in isolation but rather like pieces in a giant machine, sharing suppliers of highly skilled technical personnel, or even investment capital. For example, a software company writing control systems can simply make a phone call and immediately find a partner to manufacture the motors for assembly and testing. Or a computer vision startup can immediately test its product on a robotic exoskeleton from another company. Thanks to this seamless coordination, instead of taking several years to realize an idea, Beijing only takes a few months. In addition, that manufacturing base, China possesses an advantage that very few countries can match. Its enormous domestic market, with a rapidly aging population and a growing labor shortage. The need for robots to maintain global dominance is almost inevitable. And that enormous domestic market will become the springboard for Beijing's robotics industry to accelerate in the coming years. From hesitant first steps, 2025, powerful martial arts performances in 2026, the story of China's humanoid robots shows a carefully calculated rise. Beijing doesn't manufacture just to impress. They urgently created a new cutting-edge industry, thereby further strengthening the Chinese. But the achievements in humanoid robots are not just a source of pride for they have also created an undercurrent that is changing the global order. Let's look back at the past. The world was stunned when Beijing quietly acquired lucrative and strategically important industries, such as electric vehicle batteries, and now that scenario seems to be repeating itself with humanoid robots, as our neighbor has everything from control chips to mechanical components at rock-bottom prices. The other young ladies seem to have few options left. If you want to get cheap finished products, you need to look to China. If you want to buy the materials to build it yourself, you still have to go to the seafaring people's country. This dependence is expected by Zhongnanhai to generate immense soft power on the international stage. Moreover, the emergence of cheap robots made in China poses a difficult problem regarding employment. Following his stunning performance at the 2026 Spring Festival Gala, Professor Chuan Nguyen then shared some thoughtful reflections. I was both thrilled by the incredible pace of scientific development and a little worried. Before long, these robots could replace much of the manual labor performed. That concern is entirely, especially in developing countries. These countries relied solely on cheap labor to attract large corporations to set up factories. But when millions of robots, costing as much as a used car, appear, capable of working through the night, without ceremony, demanding no paychecks, and never even considering quitting, cheap flesh and blood labor will no longer be a competitive advantage. Large-scale job crisis, poor countries is therefore entirely predictable. Finally, we cannot ignore the military aspect when robots capable of carrying heavy loads in factories are also perfectly capable of wielding weapons on the battlefield. Professor Hans Luang from the Swedish National Defense University once commented that, given China's impressive display of robotic martial arts, there will certainly be a place for these machines in military and security operations. However, this expert believes that military application will require more time because the real battlefield is far different from the stage. But with their ability to produce and develop at lightning speed, coupled with an unyielding ambition to become king, they are truly formidable. The idea of Beijing deploying tireless robots into its military is perhaps not too far fetched. Combining market dominance with a changing labor structure and immense national potential, Chinese humanoid robots possess the power to shift the world's focus. This is no longer just a purely technological puzzle, but a redefinition of how the world operates. Despite its rapid progress, the path ahead for China's robotics industry is not paved with roses, because behind the dazzling statistics, the cracks of a technological bubble have begun to appear. There are more than 150 companies here vying for a foothold in the field of robotics development. This enormous number immediately brings to mind the electric vehicle bubble that once plunged the country of over 1 billion people into the red. But even during its peak, Beijing's electric vehicle industry never reached such a high density. And when too many people jump into the same thing, the market often falls into chaos. More worryingly, the massive amount of capital flowing into this industry comes primarily from government subsidies and incentives. This creates a false sense of security because if the oxygen supply from the budget were to be cut off, hundreds of companies could collapse en masse, leaving behind a pile of economic wreckage. Furthermore, Beijing is also facing concerns that its robots will become large but soulless objects. They have proven themselves masters at manufacturing chassis, motors, and outer shells to lower costs. However, whether robot is useful or not depends on the AI brain that controls it. In this respect, China still seems to be in disarray, while their artificial intelligence models are still unable to catch up with their American counterparts. Chinese-made humanoid robots are also at risk of falling behind because they lack the intelligence to handle AI. They are no different from overgrown but clumsy children. In addition, chasing after large quantities can also be a way to get rich quick. Launch millions of products onto the market when the technology is not yet fully mature could lead to disastrous consequences. In just a few years, thousands of outdated robots will be discarded, created giant junkyard of technology. If China focuses solely on achieving short-term quantity while neglecting in-depth research to master quality, it is highly likely to repeat the costly lessons of the past. The boom was rapid, but then it dissolved just as quickly, teetering on the fragile boundary between miraculous industrial revolution and the risk of a bursting growth bubble. The real question is no longer whether China can produce how many humanoid robots, but whether they can breathe real soul into those seemingly lifeless blocks of metal. The world is watching with bated breath, as the answer will determine whether Beijing will truly become the dominant power of the new era or merely leave behind a colossal technological graveyard after its attempt at a giant leap forward.